The transport ship Unity's Hope descended through the amber clouds of Kepler 4 to sea, its hull gleaming against the strange orange sky. Captain Ju-won Kim sat in the pilot's seat, her dark eyes scanning the readings on her console. Everything looked normal, but something felt wrong. Atmospheric composition is perfect for most species, announced Relani, the insectoid representative from the Galactic Council. Her forearms moved quickly across her equipment, checking and rechecking the data. Oxygen levels are good, temperature is mild, but I am detecting no movement anywhere on the surface. Beside her, the crystalline being called Vorthok hummed softly, his translucent body glowing pale blue. My sensors show massive cities below, infrastructure that appears functional, yet there are no energy signatures from any living beings. The third alien team member, a luminal named Flux, flickered between visible light and pure energy. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes. This world has been silent for 37 standard years. The last transmission was a simple message saying we are ascending, then nothing. Ju-won nodded, guiding the ship toward a landing pad in what appeared to be the planet's largest city. The buildings stretched high into the sky, their surfaces smooth and elegant. Gardens and walkways connected the structures like a beautiful web. Everything looked maintained and perfect, as if the inhabitants had just stepped away for a moment. Remember, we are here to investigate what happened to the Kethmori, Ju-won said as the ship touched down. They were one of the most advanced species in this sector. They had dimensional travel, consciousness transfer technology, and peaceful relations with everyone. Then they just vanished. The team put on their environmental suits and stepped outside. The air was clean and fresh, with a slight floral scent. The city around them was stunning, with buildings that seemed to grow from the ground like metallic trees. Walkways curved gracefully between structures, and gardens bloomed with alien flowers in colors that had no names. But the silence was complete. No voices, no footsteps, no hum of machinery. Just a soft whisper of wind through empty streets. They walked toward the nearest building, their footsteps echoing strangely in the quiet air. Through the transparent walls, they could see inside. Gaiwan stopped suddenly, her breath catching in her throat. Bodies, hundreds of them, perfectly preserved, sitting or lying as if they had simply gone to sleep. The Kethmori were tall, graceful beings with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. They wore flowing robes in soft colors, and their faces looked peaceful, almost content. They show no signs of injury or disease, Relani whispered, her voice tight with concern. Her antennae twitched nervously as she scanned the bodies with her equipment. It is as if they all simply stopped living at exactly the same moment. The glow dimmed to a worried purple. I am detecting residual energy patterns, but they are unlike anything in our databases. The readings are making my sensors malfunction. Flux began to flicker more rapidly, its form becoming unstable. Something is wrong here. I can feel interference with my energy matrix. We should leave this place. But Ju-won felt nothing, while her alien companions grew more anxious with each passing minute. She felt perfectly normal. In fact, she felt strangely calm, as if the planet itself was welcoming her. They moved deeper into the city, finding the same scene everywhere. Kethmori bodies, in homes, in workplaces, in gardens, all perfectly preserved, all with the same peaceful expression. There were no children's bodies, which was puzzling. Adult Kethmori of all ages, but no young ones. In the city center, they found a massive crystalline structure that pulsed with faint light. Ancient symbols covered its surface, and streams of energy flowed through channels carved into its base. This appears to be some kind of consciousness transfer device, Vorthok said, his voice shaking. But the energy readings are incredible, far beyond what the Kethmori were known to possess. Relani's equipment began sparking and smoking. My scanners are failing. The electromagnetic interference is increasing. Captain Kim, we need to return to the ship immediately. But Ji-won stepped closer to the crystal structure. As she approached, the symbols on its surface began to glow brighter. She could hear something, very faint, like voices calling from far away. Captain Flux's voice was urgent, its form now barely holding together. The energy patterns here are dangerous to our species. We must evacuate now. Ji-won turned to look at her team. Relani was backing away, her forearms wrapped around her malfunctioning equipment. Vorthok's crystal body was flickering between colors, and Flux looked like it might disappear entirely. You all return to the ship, Ji-won said quietly. I need to examine this structure more closely. Captain, that is not safe, Relani protested. Whatever killed an entire civilization could kill you too. Ji-won looked back at the crystal. The voices were getting clearer, though she still could not understand. The words, "I think they are trying to tell us something, and I think I am the only one who can hear them." As her team reluctantly headed back to the ship, Ji-won placed her hand on the crystal surface. The voices stopped whispering and began to speak directly into her mind. The crystal grew warm under Gi-won's touch, and suddenly her mind filled with voices. Not words exactly, but feelings and images that belonged to someone else. She saw flashes of the Kathmori city when it was alive, filled with beings moving gracefully through the streets, their robes flowing like water in the gentle breeze. "Help us," came a voice, soft as a whisper. "We are lost between the worlds." Ji-won pulled her hand back, gasping. The voices faded but did not disappear completely. They remained at the edge of her thoughts like a distant conversation in another room. Behind her, she could hear Rilani shouting into her communicator, "The ship's systems are failing. Captain Kim, we need to leave this planet immediately." But Gi-won could not move. The whispers were calling to her, showing her images of vast libraries filled with knowledge, laboratories where the Kathmori worked on incredible technologies, and peaceful gatherings where they discussed philosophy and science. She walked deeper into the crystal chamber, following corridors lined with more of the glowing symbols. Each step made the voices clearer. She began to understand that these were not just random thoughts, but memories of an entire civilization trying to communicate with her. The alien team members' condition grew worse by the hour. Rilani's equipment had completely shut down, and her forearms shook constantly. She kept looking over her shoulder as if something was following her, though nothing was there. Crystal body flickered between colors rapidly, and his voice became distorted. "Captain, the energy interference is affecting my core systems. I cannot maintain stability much longer. We must evacuate immediately." Flux was barely visible now, appearing only as brief flashes of light. When it tried to speak, its words came out broken and scattered. "Danger, must, leave, now, But Gi-won felt perfectly fine. In fact, she felt better than she had in years. The whispers in her mind were not frightening or painful. They felt like old friends trying to share their stories with her as she explored the crystal chambers. The voices began showing her what had happened to the Kathmori. She saw images of their scientists working frantically on something they called the final transcendence. They had discovered something terrible approaching their world, something that threatened not just their planet but their entire way of existence. "We tried to save ourselves," the voices explained. "We built a way to transfer our consciousness to a higher dimension. We thought we could escape the coming darkness. G1 saw the Kathmori gathering in this very chamber, thousands of them lying down in perfect circles around the crystal. She watched as they activated their machine, their bodies glowing with the same light that now pulsed through the crystal walls. But something had gone wrong. We became trapped." The voices continued, and now Ji-won could feel their sadness like a weight in her chest. Neither alive nor dead. We exist between dimensions, unable to return to our bodies, unable to move forward. We have been waiting for someone who could hear us. The whispers grew stronger, and Ji-won realized she was not just hearing one voice, but millions of them. The entire Kathmori civilization was somehow connected to this crystal matrix, their consciousness existing in a space between realities. She touched the crystal again, and this time the connection was so strong that she could see through their eyes, feel their memories as if they were her own. She experienced their last moments of panic as they realized their escape plan had failed, trapping them in an endless twilight existence. Why can I hear you when the others cannot? Gi-won asked with her thoughts. The response came like a flood of understanding. Human minds worked differently than other species, where aliens thought in logical patterns and predictable sequences. Human thoughts were chaotic, jumping between ideas in ways that seemed random but somehow made sense. This chaos, which other species sometimes saw as a weakness, allowed humans to connect with quantum systems that operated beyond normal logic. Your thoughts move like quantum particles, the voices explained. Unpredictable, existing in multiple states at once. This lets you interface with our consciousness matrix. We have been waiting decades for a human to find us. Outside the chamber, Gi-won could hear her team calling for her desperately. Their voices sounded strange and distorted, as if they were speaking through water. The electromagnetic interference was getting stronger, and she knew they were suffering, but the Kathmori had more to show her. Through their memories, she saw what they had been trying to escape from, images of something vast and dark, moving through space, consuming entire star systems, leaving nothing but empty void behind it. It comes for your galaxy next, the voices warned. Asterisk, the void tide cannot be stopped by normal weapons or defenses. We tried to run from it, but running only delayed the inevitable. Asterisk, Juon felt a chill despite the warm air in the chamber. What is the void tide? The answer came in fragments of terror and desperate knowledge. The void tide was not just a destroyer of worlds, but a consumer of reality itself. It unmade the very fabric of space and time, leaving behind areas where nothing could exist. But there is hope, the voices continued. Asterisk, we learned something before we became trapped. Humans have the ability to create weapons that should not exist, to find solutions that defy logic. You are the key to stopping what we could not. Asterisk, the crystal chamber suddenly filled with terrible images that made Jiwon stumble backward. Through the whispers, she saw the universe as the Kethmori had seen it in their final days. Entire galaxies, going dark, one by one, as something impossible moved through space. The void tide was not like any enemy she could imagine. It was not a fleet of ships or an army of soldiers. It was wrongness itself, a moving wound in reality that consumed everything it touched. Where it passed, stars simply stopped existing, planets vanished as if they had never been born. Even the empty space between worlds disappeared, leaving behind areas where nothing could ever exist again. Asterisk, we watched it destroy the Andorian cluster, the voices told her, and she felt their ancient terror as if it were her own. Asterisk, 50 billion stars, gone in moments, not destroyed, but unmade, as if they had never been part of the universe at all. Asterisk, Jiwon saw through their memories how the Kethmori scientists had tracked the void tide's movement. It followed no pattern that made sense, appearing in different parts of the galaxy seemingly at random, but slowly, they realized it was not random at all. The void tide was hunting for something specific, consuming entire star systems to find what it sought. It feeds on consciousness, the whispers explained. Asterisk, advanced civilizations draw it like light draws moths. The more intelligent a species becomes, the stronger the attraction. We realized it was coming for us next. Asterisk, the images shifted, showing the Kethmori's desperate attempts to save themselves. They had tried everything, weapons that could destroy planets, shields that could protect entire solar systems, even attempts to hide their consciousness from the void tide's hunger. Nothing worked. The final transcendence was our last hope. The voices continued, and Jiwon felt their crushing disappointment. Asterisk, we thought if we could transfer our consciousness to a higher dimension, we could escape, but we made a terrible mistake. Asterisk, she saw the moment of their failure through thousands of eyes at once. The Kethmori had gathered in chambers like this one across their world, ready to upload their minds to safety. But when they activated the transcendence device, something went wrong. Instead of ascending to a higher plane, they became trapped between dimensions, existing in a space that was neither life nor death. Asterisk, we can see our bodies lying still, but we cannot return to them. Asterisk, the voices said, and their anguish was overwhelming. Asterisk, we can see the higher dimension we tried to reach, but we cannot move forward. We are prisoners in a space that should not exist, watching our world grow cold and empty. Asterisk, outside the chamber, Jiwon could hear chaos erupting. Relani was screaming into her communicator, her voice high with panic. Emergency evacuation, all systems failing. The psychic interference is destroying our equipment. Vorthex's crystal body was flashing rapidly between colors, and his voice came out as broken fragments. Cannot maintain coherence must leave now. Flux had almost completely disappeared, existing only as brief sparks of light that appeared and vanished randomly around the chamber. But the worst part was what the whispers showed her next. The Kethmori had not escaped the void tide by becoming trapped between dimensions. They had only delayed their fate. Even now, caught between realities, they could see it approaching their galaxy. It comes for the Milky Way, the voices said, becoming urgent and desperate. Asterisk, your galaxy, your Earth, your species. The void tide has consumed 3 galaxies already, and yours will be next. We can see it moving through the void between galaxies, drawn by the growing intelligence of your civilization. Asterisk, the images that flooded Jiwon's mind were terrifying. She saw Earth as the void tide would see it, a bright beacon of consciousness. In the darkness of space, humanity's rapid technological development, their expansion into space, their growing understanding of the universe, all of it was calling to the destroyer like a signal fire. Asterisk, how long do we have? Jiwon asked, though she dreaded the answer. 50 years, perhaps less, came the reply. Asterisk, time moves strangely in the void between galaxies, but we can see it approaching, and nothing will stop it unless ... Asterisk, the whispers suddenly became screams of warning that made Ji-won fall to her knees. Images flashed through her mind too quickly to understand. Laboratories filled with impossible devices, humans working frantically on projects that defied the laws of physics, weapons being built that should not be able to exist. Asterisk, humans are different, the voices screamed. Asterisk, your minds work in ways that break the patterns of reality. You can create solutions that pure logic cannot reach. You are the only hope for this universe. Asterisk, behind her she heard Ralani collapse, her equipment finally completely destroyed by the psychic interference. Vorthex's form was becoming unstable, and Flux had disappeared entirely. The alien members of her team were being driven to the edge of madness by forces their minds could not process, but Ji-won remained stable, her chaotic human thoughts somehow compatible with the impossible space where the Kethmori existed. She was their link to the living world, the only being who could hear their desperate message. Asterisk, we know how to build the weapon, the voices continued, calmer now but still urgent. Asterisk, but only human minds can make it work. The device requires thinking that defies logic, creativity that ignores the rules of physics. We will show you, but you must be willing to risk everything to save your species. Asterisk. Ji-won looked back toward where her team lay unconscious or barely functioning. She had a choice to make. The crystal chamber pulsed with brighter light as the Kethmori consciousness pressed closer to Ji-won's mind. She could feel millions of alien thoughts trying to explain something that had no words in any language. Asterisk, your species is unique in the galaxy. Asterisk, the voices said, and suddenly Ji-won was seeing herself through their perspective. Her thoughts moved like lightning, jumping between ideas in ways that seemed random but somehow created new connections. Asterisk, other species think in straight lines, following logic from one point to the next, but human minds dance between possibilities. Asterisk, the whispers showed her examples from across the galaxy. The Ralani always followed careful procedures, their insect-like minds processing information in perfect order. The Vorthok thought in crystalline patterns, each thought connecting to the next in geometric precision. Even the energy-based luminals followed predictable flows of consciousness. Asterisk, but humans think in chaos. The voices continued with something that felt like wonder. Asterisk, you make leaps of understanding that bypass logic entirely. You find solutions by feeling rather than calculating. This chaos in your neural patterns creates what we call chaos resonance. Asterisk, Ji-won felt them probing her mind gently, examining the way her thoughts worked. She was thinking about the void tide while simultaneously worrying about her team, remembering a song from her childhood, and wondering what her mother would say about her being on an alien world. Any other species would find such scattered thinking inefficient. But the Kethmori saw it as miraculous. This chaos makes you immune to the void tide's primary weapon, they explained. Asterisk, the destroyer unmakes reality by imposing perfect logical order on the universe. It turns the beautiful randomness of existence into cold, empty mathematics. But chaotic minds like yours cannot be forced into such patterns. Asterisk, the images they showed her were terrifying and wonderful at the same time. She saw the void tide approaching worlds where logical species lived. As it drew near, the inhabitants found their thoughts becoming rigid, their creativity dying, their ability to adapt or change slowly disappearing. By the time the void tide arrived, entire civilizations had become so locked into logical patterns that they could not even conceive of resistance. Asterisk, but humans would fight it differently. The voices said with growing excitement. Asterisk, your chaos would protect you from its reality warping effects. You would see solutions that others cannot imagine, create weapons that should not work, find hope where logic says there is none. Asterisk, behind Ji-won, she could hear Ralani struggling to breathe. The insectoid's carefully ordered mind was being destroyed by the psychic interference from the trapped Kethmori consciousness. Vorthok lay motionless, his crystal form flickering weakly. Flux had not reappeared since vanishing an hour ago. Asterisk, we have been waiting for your species to develop space travel. Asterisk, the whispers continued. Asterisk, for decades, we watched your world from our prison between dimensions. We saw humans create art that defied explanation, solve problems through dreams and intuition, build technologies by combining ideas that should not work together. We knew you were our only hope. Asterisk, the crystal chamber around Ji-won began to change, walls shifting to show complex diagrams and equations that hurt to look at directly. The mathematics were wrong in ways that made her head spin, but somehow she understood what they were trying to show her. The paradox engine, the voices said. Asterisk, a weapon that uses illogical quantum mechanics to create reality-defying solutions. It works by embracing contradictions instead of resolving them, by making the impossible temporarily possible. Asterisk, Jawan stared at the diagrams, trying to understand how such a device could exist. The equations seemed to cancel themselves out, creating mathematical paradoxes that should have made the entire system collapse. But instead of failing, the contradictions somehow amplified each other, creating effects that could not be predicted or explained. Only human minds can build this weapon, the Kethmori explained. Asterisk, other species would try to make the mathematics work logically, and the device would fail. But humans can accept that some things do not need to make sense to be true. You can build impossible machines and make them work through faith and intuition. Asterisk, the whispers grew more urgent. Asterisk, but we can only show you the complete plans if you allow us to fully connect with your consciousness. The process is dangerous. It may destroy your mind, or trap you here with us forever. But without this knowledge, the void tide will consume your galaxy just as it consumed ours. Asterisk. G1 looked back at her alien teammates lying unconscious on the chamber floor. Their ship's automated systems would keep them alive, and if she chose to leave now, they could all evacuate safely. They could return to their respective worlds and live normal lives for the next 50 years, until the void tide arrived to unmake everything they had ever known. Choose quickly, the voices urged. Asterisk, the psychic interference from our trapped consciousness is growing stronger. Soon it will affect even you. If you are going to attempt the full connection, it must be now. Asterisk. Juwon closed her eyes and thought about Earth. She pictured her home, city of Seoul, with its millions of people going about their daily lives, unaware that their entire universe was in danger. She thought about her younger brother Minho, who was studying engineering and dreamed of building startups. She thought about her parents, who had raised her to believe that humans could overcome any obstacle if they were brave enough to try. Asterisk, I need to save them all, she thought. The crystal grew warm under her hands as she pressed both palms against its surface. Asterisk, show me everything, she said aloud. The chamber filled with blinding light. The moment Ji-won's hands touched the crystal, her world exploded into light and sound and memories that were not her own. Millions of Kethmori voices flooded into her mind at once, each one trying to share their knowledge, their fears, their final moments of life. She screamed as alien thoughts crashed against her human consciousness like waves against a cliff. For a terrifying moment, she felt herself dissolving, her identity scattered among the countless minds of the trapped civilization. She was a Kethmori scientist working frantically in a laboratory. She was a parent saying goodbye to children, who had already been evacuated to other worlds. She was a philosopher contemplating the end of everything they had built. Hold on, her own voice whispered in her mind. Asterisk, remember who you are. Remember Earth. Remember why you are here. Asterisk, slowly, painfully, she pulled her scattered thoughts back together. The chaos that made her human, the same randomness that other species saw as weakness, became her anchor, while the Kethmori consciousness tried to organize itself into logical patterns. Ji-won's mind danced between their memories, taking what she needed without losing herself. The knowledge flowed into her like water filling a cup. She saw the complete blueprints for the paradox engine, understood how its impossible mathematics could create weapons that defied the laws of physics. She learned about quantum resonance fields that could exist in multiple states at once, about energy sources that drew power from the spaces between dimensions, about materials that became stronger when they should logically fall apart. But with the knowledge came the weight of an entire civilization's final moments. She felt their terror as they realized their escape plan had failed, their desperation as they became trapped between dimensions, their long decades of watching their world grow cold and empty. She carried their memories of the void tide's approach, the way it had consumed galaxy after galaxy, leaving behind only empty space where billions of stars had once shone. Asterisk, it will reach your galaxy in 47 years, the voices told her as the connection began to weaken. Asterisk, maybe less. Time moves strangely in the void between galaxies, and it may be accelerating. Asterisk, hours passed, or maybe days. Ji-won lost track of time as the Kethmori consciousness shared everything they knew about the approaching destroyer. She learned that the void tide was not truly alive, but it was not dead either. It was entropy given form. The universe's tendency toward chaos and dissolution turned into a cosmic force that consumed everything in its path. Asterisk, but humans can fight entropy. The voices whispered as they began to fade. Asterisk, you create order from chaos through will and imagination. You build impossible things and make them work through determination. You are the universe's answer to its own destruction. Asterisk, when the connection finally broke, Guan collapsed to the crystal chamber floor. Her mind felt like it had been stretched to its breaking point and then snapped back together. She lay there, for a long time, trying to separate her own memories from the millions of alien experiences now crowded into her consciousness. Her team was still unconscious, but their breathing was steady. The psychic interference had ended when the Kethmori pulled back their consciousness, and slowly their equipment began to function again. It took 2 days for them to recover enough to return to their ship, and another week before they could make the journey back to Earth. G1 said nothing about what she had learned during the long trip home. How could she explain that she now carried the memories of an entire civilization in her mind? How could she describe the knowledge of weapons that should not exist, or the terrible certainty that humanity had less than 50 years to save not just their own galaxy, but the universe itself? When they reached Earth, she requested an immediate meeting with the Galactic Council. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall on Lunar Station, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, hums, and translated voices. G1 stood before them, feeling the weight of the Kethmori's final message pressing against her thoughts. She looked out at the assembled aliens, these logical, orderly beings who had built a peaceful civilization based on reason and cooperation. Soon she would have to tell them that reason would not be enough. The Kethmori are not dead, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. They are trapped between dimensions, and they have been waiting for someone who could hear their warning. She told them about the void tide, about the approaching destroyer that consumed galaxies, about the 47 years they had left to prepare. She watched as the assembled representatives processed this information, their logical minds struggling to accept the scope of the threat. The Kethmori have given us the knowledge to build a weapon that can stop this destroyer, continued, but it requires technology that defies conventional physics. It requires thinking that ignores the rules of logic and creates solutions through imagination and will. She paused, looking out at the sea of alien faces. The universe is ending, but humans dream of impossible things. And sometimes, the impossible is exactly what reality needs. The council chamber erupted in debate, but Guan was already thinking ahead. She had names in her mind now, humans who could help build the impossible, scientists who questioned everything, engineers who built machines that should not work, artists who saw beauty in chaos. The real work was just beginning.